I was forced to play indie video games for weeks, and one thing I noticed is that most indie devs have a pretty shaky grasp on light and shadow. Now, this is a topic that has been around for thousands of years, and you can find some fantastic tutorials on it, but I thought I would teach you just a little bit about how to think about this in a video game. Specifically, a small-time indie video game. You need both. You always need both light and shadow, and this is something that a lot of devs don't seem to understand. They make their dark scenes just dark and their light scenes just light, but the light defines the dark and the dark defines the light, and they both define the world. You need both all the time in every scene. What you choose to put in shadow and what you choose to put in light changes how the scene works. For example, your horror game, oh, it's dark. We want the whole game to be dark, right? No, you don't. You don't want the whole game to be dark. You want the scenes to be dark, and you want the player to have a light to help them explore the darkness. The fact that they have a light helps to give shape to the darkness. It makes the game scarier. Let me show you just a basic setup I did for this subway station in this tutorial I made. Here at the top floor, we don't want the player to stay here. We don't want the player to care about this location. So it's darkly lit and there's no details in the shadows. But I also use these splashes of light. This not only gives the player's eye something to focus on, and not only looks cool, but it defines the shape of this station. You can already tell just by glancing that there is nothing up here. The light falls on the floor is flat, there is nothing to see. I use the light in the shadow to define the shape of the area. And in the process, I try and convince the player that there's just no reason to stay up here and nothing to look for. This is further enhanced by the fact that the shadows do not contain anything. None of these shadows are alluring. You don't want to go closer to that corner over there because there's clearly nothing in it, so you don't care. When you move downstairs, we move into a well-lit area, but it still has plenty of shadows. Shadows on the walls, shadows behind these, ticket vendors, shadow over there in that corner. Again, I'm using the light to show you where you might want to pay attention. All of the characters are well lit against relatively dark backgrounds because I want you to notice them and pay attention to them. All of the plot devices well lit against a relatively dark background. Even that's a plot device over there. The whole point is to use the light to tell the player what they should care about. In addition, I'm still using the rain light to define the shape of the world. It's falling on the corner of the world that you should care about, and it's helping to define both the floor and the wall in that corner. It's defining the shape of the world. As we move into the back here, you're going to be walking around and you're going to notice that there is a very attractive bright light right here, and you're going to go in. That's the point. There is something worth investigating over here. And maybe you look this way, and there's definitely shadows over there, but there doesn't seem to be anything worthwhile in the shadows. So you probably will turn around and see this door, which is very brightly lit, and beyond it, there does seem to be a little something, doesn't there? Having the shadows be enticing is another core feature of the use of light and shadow. Obviously, if your shadows are inky black, this is a little bit difficult, but in most cases, your shadows are not pure black, and having something in the shadows that the player wants to squint at and take a look at can really help the player fall into your game world. Classic example, the boss monster showed up. The boss monster is almost always backlit. There's a bright light behind the boss monster, but the boss monster's features are in shadow. So the player squints and says, oh my gosh, does he have a scarred face? Is he smiling? Oh, that's so creepy. The initial impression is whatever is well lit, and then past that you squint at the shadows. And in this case, I'm using that to try and pull the player into this doorway. Now here is an eye adaptation glitch. I haven't figured out how to fix it. Like most game engines, Unreal has eye adaptation. In Unreal, it is on by default, and it's actually on a really bright setting. I turned the setting down quite a bit. This is quite good because eye adaptation is how the human eye actually works. You go into a dark room, you can't see anything for a bit, and then your eye adapts and you can, right? In a video game, you're looking at a monitor or a cell phone or whatever. Your eye adaptation will adapt to the actual physical world around you, your office, your bedroom, your bus stop, whatever. It won't adapt to the video game. So 99.999% of times, you need the video game to show the player an already adapted image, as if the player had the eye adaptation you would expect them to have. So if you have a night scene, you'd render the night scene as if it were rendered by a person who had been standing in the darkness long enough to be able to see what is going on. Because there's no other way for the player to be able to tell. Otherwise, it'll just be dark. In this case, the eye adaptation for some reason went really, really dark. I haven't figured out exactly why yet. I'll sort it out at some point. But as we come in here, we can be pulled forward into the shadow. We can start to see details, and as our eye adaptation blossoms, we can see that there are 3 characters back here kind of showing off and hanging out in the back of this place. This is a very dark scene. Look how much of this is either pitch black or very dark. But you can clearly see all of the characters involved. And of course, there are no, annoying navigation problems that you're going to run into because of the darkness. It's just a straight shot down a tube. So this sort of scene is lit well enough that we can tell what's going on. The shadows aren't interesting anymore. We've already looked at them. These were the shadows before. Now the light is what's interesting. We're looking at these characters. We're trying to figure out who they are. That's the whole point. We have created a dark scene, but it's not just dark. Our eyes are drawn to the light, and the light is clear enough that we can see our characters. We can see our points of interest. Pretty basic, right? So here is the opposite. Not all shadows are dark. There are also there are scenes where it's so bright that you can't see in the light. There are times when having too much light blows things out and plays the same role as a shadow. For example, look at this. This is just as hard to see as shadows, and in the same way that a shadow can make you squint and wonder what's going on back there, a blown out light can do the exact same thing. There is fundamentally very little difference in terms of whether you're using fairly dark shadows or blown out lights to hide whatever's going on. Both of these things are basically equivalent, although obviously the game engine renders them with different priorities and side effects. I just wanted everybody to understand how light and shadow are worth considering. Do not make your dark scenes just dark. Do not make your light scenes just light. Understand what role the shadow plays. Understand what role the light plays. The light is more or less what the player is going to notice first, and then they're going to start to squint at the shadows. Is that what you want? Are there things in your shadows that you want them to be squinting for, or do you want them to get pulled along into more areas? How are you going to use your shadows to make your scenes feel good, feel correct? In a bright sunny day, you might use the shadows to really highlight how hot the sun is. In a warm, cozy nook in a house, you might read a book by the fireplace. You'd use the light to highlight the fireplace and the reading of the book. And then around that would be a ring of shadows that the player wouldn't really look too hard at because they're focused on the cozy little reality in the light. But in a horror game, the light is a desperate flicker as they're trying to explore those shadows. It's up to you how you want to use light and shadow, and it can vary from scene to scene. But please make sure I can see your game. It's very hard to play games where they're just dark. Have a good one.